Hello and welcome back to IT3. So you've all been aware that we've had some branding. So we've changed to IT Tech Talks, IT3. It's a little bit rolls off the tongue better. So we're going to roll with that. So welcome to IT3. It's beginning of 2025. We had Unique on last week, or the last show, I should say, and recording, what had happened in 24 and what happened in 25. So look for today's show to kind of put you on maybe a path to try to get to what people are doing in 25, or at least to a best practices. Thank you all for coming to the show, and I appreciate you all for listening, liking, and subscribing. So let's keep this going. We got a lot of good momentum, and we're just going to keep plowing through 25. Professor, how are you?
Doing well. Looking forward to the show here today and continuing the series. And just enjoying ski season as much as possible.
Unique, welcome back. How are you?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Chris. Great 2025, starting off pretty exciting news in the industry, and looking forward to the spring. We have some pretty good weather down here in Georgia this time of the year. So
yeah, you do. Yes, you do. I'm gonna have to visit you down there.
Please do come.
Yeah, I've always had a good time down. There's a lot of really good natural parks down there too,
Oh,
state
yeah.
parks. It's really, really, really nice.
The best part of Georgia.
Absolutely. So we don't have to grill you because we grilled you the last time as a first. So we're just going to dive right in. So again, thank you all for coming here. We're going to talk about security frameworks today and why they're important for all businesses. We're also going to talk about what kinds of frameworks there are and if they apply to you. So I label this, we like to rate our shows now. I rate this for every business, but specifically towards more the security side of the house. But if you are a business leader, VCD level person, this is something you want to hear, and ask your security team if you're a subscriber and a listener to us. So we're just going to kick off about the importance of it. So, it's one thing to I'm going to give you my first take and then I'll toss it to you guys. But my first take is one thing you never compromise on is security, right? Mm-hmm. And the other thing you don't want to compromise on is picking the right security. You don't want to just do shots in the dark. You don't want to see an ad on whatever tech trade thing you view or see and say, oh, that's my security thing that I need to have because it covers a buzzword. We need to make sure that when we're picking security solutions that they map to what we need to do as a business and what we need to do as IT leaders of not only our business, but, the globe at large. We are all one. I like to feel that. I don't know. It's a little too warm and fuzzy for me. People aren't used to that, but so there's importance around it. Just by, shots in the dark don't get it done. What are some of the things that you think from an importance of picking a framework, Unique?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I kind of think of frameworks as a compass. As a technologist in the field, such as you, Mike and Chris, I think you've been in. Yeah, everyone has probably been in a situation. We love technology. That's the reason. It's the curiosity. It's getting our hands dirty and kicking the tires and playing with things to create these solutions. And as a technologist, your focus may just be on the technology. What's that latest trend, that new tool that's out there and such and such. Mm-hmm. And so you can get so enamored with the technology and the tech itself that you can sometimes lose focus on what that objective is. Like, what are we really working hard for? What is the purpose of this? It's not just to play with these tools, but it's actually to drive a solution, drive some value. And that's kind of where security frameworks come into play, and frameworks in general. I look at frameworks as, hey, security is great, technology is great, but you need to know how to apply it. And what are some best practices that you can kind of gear your technology, the program that you're focused on, or the technology that you specialize in, to meet this overarching goal that's going to protect the business. That's what we're in the enterprise or the small business makes, is that we're trying to protect the business. We're driving business, we're driving outcomes, and we need a framework that's going to make sure that we're targeted at the right things so that we can do the right practices to make our businesses secure. So I see the technology, the security frameworks as a good reference point for one, as a business leader, for you to have some reassurance that you're following the right things, the right steps, the right methods and principles to protect your business assets that's going to make you money. and also as a technologist to make sure that the stuff that you're working on is actually driving true value for the business and actually giving leaders and practitioners and consumers that trust, that trust and warm feeling that we're all looking for.
Yeah. Well, so too bad your mic's on a boom, because you could have just dropped it there and we could have continued on. That was brilliant.
Well, I'm gonna take issue with your intro, Mike. Actually,
all right.
Because I agree with you. Nobody should compromise on security. I think all too often people do compromise on security.
True.
It's unfortunately, it almost seems like it's still an afterthought in a lot of places with regard to budget, with regard to strategy, right? And I mean, look, I'll just mic drop there, right? As to really what a short-sighted mindset that is. But it just happens far too often. Or these are the tools that we use, so we're just going to set it and forget it. And we all know, and I would hope that all of our listeners know that it's not that simple, right? And I don't think anything is that simple today in technology. When you look at things like security frameworks, I liken them to, coming from the data world, a data strategy, an all-up data strategy for your organization. Again, it shouldn't be ignored, but unfortunately it is all too often. And when you talk about driving value to the organization, I think both areas, both security and data, can be looked upon as cost centers. When in reality, it's mitigating risk, right? Security speaks for itself, but from a data standpoint, if you're not appropriately looking at your data estate within your organization, you're not able to make good decisions about what you need, how it can help you run the business, and those types of things. So I think that from a framework standpoint, the opportunity to always have that North Star, right? People ask me, well, how the hell do you get everything done that you get done? Because I've got, I think everybody knows I got a lot of stuff going on. And it's just, it's sort of having that, long-term picture. What am I doing long-term? And what can I do day to day in order to achieve those long-term goals? And any framework, it doesn't matter who you get it from, right? Any framework is going to help with that. Now, once you have that stuff deployed, then you get a chance to kind of look at, okay, well, is this quite the right framework for what we're trying to do? But the reality is you got to start somewhere, right? So I think anything that you can get your hands on is a great starting point.
Yeah, for sure. Just kind of piggyback on that. I still think his was the mic drop. Sorry, Chris.
Chris was good. Great.
It was really good. Yeah. It's so good. I'm going to piggyback off of it. One of the things I think is, and I'm going to ask these questions of both of you. You just put your hand up. You don't have to answer, or you can say something you want. How often have you rolled into a customer and they're using a security tool because that's what they've always used?
Absolutely.
Oh,
how often exactly? How often have you rolled into a customer and you've seen security tools that were purchased and in use and only because of price? They were, but all of us, right?
I've been that customer.
Yeah. So one of the things about a framework can actually help you make those decisions, North Star or however you want to represent it. It'll help you make a decision because there's this compliance side of the house that has to map to things. So regardless of what the business wants to spend or what you like to use, we still have to achieve certain things in certain industries. The majority of the industries I work with have some sort of a compliance overlay, right? So CMMC, or if you're looking for HIPAA, high trust, like all these different things. So that's a compliance role. And we can use these frameworks to obtain controls to get to that. So I think that's one of the takeaways I want our listeners to understand is both of you guys, both drops of the mic were beautiful. It's great. Let's take that philosophy and kind of map that to our risk and exposure, because we might not be able to contract with a particular vendor or particular customer because we're not meeting certain things. I mean, from my world, little old me sitting in Southwestern Pennsylvania, the compliance stuff that I have to do just to work with my customers is it's downright obnoxious, but we do it, right? Same thing if you're I call them B companies, billion-dollar companies. You need to achieve certain things to be able to transact your business. So this is going to get you there. In thinking of that, there's some general industry and then there's some specific industry things. Like I mentioned, HIPAA, high trust. Everybody seems to know that's medical. So there's the NIST cybersecurity framework. It's all businesses can comply to NIST. NIST is massive, right? It's huge. There's also some cyber essentials in specifically to the EU and the UK that kind of map to NIST, but they have their own vetting process. So core functions: identity, protect, detect, respond, recover. Having that core philosophy of security on the ground, right? This is all the stuff that we see in the pinwheels, and every vendor likes to draw out, say, hey, look, we do all this. That maps to NIST. So ISO and IEC 27. What's the number? 27001. Yeah. So that's an international standard. So if you're going to be doing information security management, that's right up Chris's alley. There's a lot involved with ISO. When you deal with manufacturing and facilities, you're either ISO if you're large, or you're striving for ISO, because if you plan on transacting across the world, this is just standard frameworks. CIS controls, they're simplified controls. You'll see that for even if you sign up for AWS or Azure, or I say it, Google, so you're putting your compute out there. You'll find that a lot of the controls, the basic controls that they say, hey, we got you covered, a lot of those are just basic CIS controls. In my opinion, that's the starting point, but that's not where you stop. You have to keep going past that. And one I added to our list here is COBIT. So that's governance and management of enterprise IT. So we talked about compliance and governance. So COBIT kind of maps into deep, more technical than some of the others. It's more of a straddling of governance and compliance and security tooling and frameworks. So these are just some basic things you probably have heard. I know if you're a deep IT guy, you know them, you've heard them all. But for our business side, these are things that might map to you, and that if you pick a framework, and we're going to talk about a little bit more deeper frameworks that are a little more comprehensive here in a moment. But if you were to map to one of these types of frameworks, you are going to be on a right path. And if you see it through and you do that budget battle every year, you're going to be in a good spot. So those are the general areas that we see for general industry. But there's also some specific frameworks out there around some of the largest providers, Microsoft, like our friends here today. Unique, you want to kind of touch on any of those frameworks?
Yeah, I actually want to go back to a couple of that you rattled off, and it's really at the top of the conversation that we had just a minute ago. And Chris, rightfully so, called out that sometimes enterprises, they overlook the importance of security in these frameworks just because it can be an afterthought, and that's always been a struggle. I've been in the field for almost 25 years, and since I've started, there's always been historically this battle of security or IT insecurity being a cost center and not generating revenue, and how do you quantify the value of the investments that we're making from a technology perspective year over year, and CISOs and directors are fighting for budget every year and really trying to justify costs and justify headcount, and it's always this philosophical battle. And I think the recent years that I've seen, that trend has changed. It's not quite it's not perfect yet, but you've seen the introduction of you've seen the introduction of BISOs, where you have a business information security officer, pretty much this hybrid of business and technology that's aligned to the different lines of business, that can speak the business, knows the business, but also knows the intersection of security and what it means to help these lines of business and these programs get off the ground securely. And I think part of that is going back to the framework discussion is risk identification. Chris talked about it. Just the data estate, knowing what's important inside of your environment, and you spoke about it, Mike, with exposures and vulnerabilities, and what's the cost of not doing security, and that's really that risk mitigation and that quantifiable impact to losing data or losing brand trust and credibility with your customers due to exposure of sensitive data, that we've seen in the news every day. That cost of not doing is typically higher than the cost of actually doing. And that's what these frameworks provide you, is that a lot of these frameworks that we refer to are vendor neutral. So you'll probably never see a framework that, unless it's by a vendor that we'll talk about in a minute. But your NIST, which is like the granddaddy for cybersecurity frameworks, and a
Yep.
lot of everything from a security strategy is based off of, when you talk about the different cycles of NIST, and NIST CSF 2.0 is the most recent iteration, can really give practitioners and leaders a good North Star to how to incorporate a good security program and principles and methodologies that can be measurable. And that's the key when you talk about from securities. How do you measure effectiveness and success? And how do you quantify that to business impact? So use these frameworks as that North Star, the guiding point. And it's not to say that you need to do everything.
That's what I was just gonna say.
It's based on the nature of the business. I think your business and any regulatory standards that you have to comply to, and those requirements will dictate how much you invest in. But it's generally good as a good reference point to really guide directionally what your strategy is long term. But then also, what are the short-term wins that you can then go back to procurement, back to your CIO or CISO, and say, hey, this is the reason why we need to invest, and this is what we've shown year over year as improvements that really justifies the spend. And so you're starting to see more of that intersection. I think now, even in the industry, you're seeing CISOs who are more business savvy, and now part of those business discussions, as Chris mentioned, that will hopefully reduce that, that security not being a top priority or being an overlooked, entity.
Do you know what I found unique is, and Chris, you probably are finding this too, is back in the day when cyber insurance became a thing, we check boxes. Oh yeah, we change our passwords. We do this, we do that. Now you're being asked, what framework do you apply to? Do you do 171? We're seeing this. I'm being asked by customers, can you answer these for us? I was like, yeah, you don't do any of that.
No, I mean, it's a requirement for cyber insurance now. Because I feel like a lot of people were just kind of checking the box, and then they'd get a ransomware attack, and we're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, right? So, I mean, it's just a tremendous risk.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, for sure. So let's talk about those specific frameworks. I know you're very familiar with Unique. So I know Microsoft has several out there do you remember the old, it was based on processes, but married into, was kind of like the MOF plus security that they had decades ago. I think we've evolved beyond that to, the Microsoft cybersecurity reference architecture, the MCRA. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I certainly will. And that's like one of my go-to references. And I have to throw a plug and a big kudos to Mark Simos. And for folks that are in the industry, know who Mark Simos is. He is kind of like the grand architect of this Microsoft security reference architecture framework. And it's part of our security adoption framework. And for folks that don't know, we talk about we rattled off a whole list of different frameworks that are industry specific. Microsoft, what we've done in our customers who invest in our technology and you just use our technology for security or aspects or integrate with security, whether directly or indirectly, we like to provide our customers a reference architecture. Part of hey, if you're trying to adopt NIST or ISO or CIS or whatever may be, or TOGAF, which we haven't talked about with Open Group for Zero Trust.
Yep.
How do you design that, and how do you incorporate or implement that using Microsoft Security?
Yeah.
And so the cybersecurity reference architecture, which Mark and others, part of our security architecture teams, they've designed this framework, which gives you good logical and component architectures of how to incorporate these different technologies in your small, medium business, and your enterprise. And it's very domain specific. So we have security reference architectures that can show you how to build a ground up identity access management program. If you want to zero in on zero trust, how do you incorporate zero trust using Microsoft security? If you need a threat protection platform that protects your email, your identities, your applications, your devices, users from a front office perspective, or even infrastructure from a back office perspective, what are the components that comprises that solution, and also how do they integrate? So
Yeah, that's
from
important.
a practitioner, and I've spent a majority of my career as a security enterprise architect, and I valued make it simple, keep it simple. Like I like fancy diagrams, and I want the visual is always helpful for me because I can narrow in on particular components. I can understand the logical architecture, the component architecture, what are the inputs and the outputs, and what are the integration points. And so if you're looking for just kind of curious, like, hey, how does Microsoft do zero trust, or how do they incorporate OT security? We have a big operational technology factory floor, and we need to secure it. And we have Microsoft. Can we use Microsoft technology? 9 out of 10, you can. So what are those components? Or if we're doing server protection, or we have Kubernetes, or we have containers, or we have different IaaS, PaaS type solutions, there's a reference architecture for that can ground you in understanding how we as Microsoft will do things, but also how it maps to the industry. And so that's a key point that I want to make, because the security adoption framework, which is part of which the cybersecurity reference architecture is a part of, rolls up into, that's our stance, Microsoft stance, to say, hey, we know we have NIST, you have ISO, we have CIS. Microsoft, we're not in a bubble. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're not trying to say, hey, do it Microsoft's way and you're fully compliant. No, we're saying, well, we have some security controls and technologies, and we're going to help you map to NIST, to CIS, to TOGAF, to CIS controls and other frameworks, HIPAA, MITRE ATT&CK, whatever that framework is. And that is the value of any vendor, and that's what the security market is made of now, is our vendors who now say, hey, companies are sometimes complying to more than one control. Maybe they're a multinational, multi-vertical company. They do manufacturing. They have a little bit of healthcare. And so they have to comply to PCI, to HIPAA, to GDPR. So if you have all of these controls in these different segments, how do you get that unified view to give you a good pulse check of where you're at?
Yeah.
And that is really the value of an adoption framework, is to say, hey, no matter what controls you have that you need to comply with, we're going to provide you a baseline that is pretty much standardized across all of these controls. And then you have the steps, you can assess kind of where you're at from a maturity perspective and kind of fill in the gaps and iterate from there. So security adoption framework is that overarching framework. The cybersecurity reference architecture is a part of that. So as an engineer, architect, technologist, you can use that to really get a good reference point of where you're at. Use the adoption framework to kind of really assess from a cybersecurity maturity of where you want to be, and kind of assess the tooling that will support you during that journey. And then we have other things like the cloud adoption framework. Microsoft, listen, our customers, we're not single cloud. We have customers that are on AWS, GCP, and multi-cloud. And Microsoft security is just not for Microsoft. We're a true security company is heterogeneous. We'll on-prem, and you need to really have a unified security strategy that encompasses all of these different vectors.
Yep.
And really, at the premise is really risk management and keeping that framework where you can assess it. So that's what the cybersecurity reference architecture provides you, which rolls into that security adoption framework that we talked about.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because we recently, for the day job, we do a lot of cloud adoption framework. We recently started looking at deploying the security adoption, because we're asked a lot about that for landing zones and stuff. And you made the key takeaway. I'm going to say it now instead of waiting till later. One of the key takeaways is it's for all, right? So you can have it everywhere. There's security tooling that reaches down into your data center, into your colo, into AWS, name the cloud. It is agnostic as any other vendor that you would find on the street, especially the management tools. So if you couple the management tools, managing multiple clouds and on-prem with the security tooling, you're going to get that a good look at what you have. You don't have to bounce around between tools and do math in your head and carry the one and figure it out. It's kind of consolidated. Let's touch on one thing that we didn't mention yet. It is this phrase. I'm going to preface what I'm about to say is what I'm about to say as a title is more of a philosophy, because some people tag it as a product. So zero trust or ZTNA, or you put zero trust in front of something, a vendor is going to sell it as a product. It's more of a framework and a mentality, and you apply your tools and stuff. And I know Chris probably deals with this heavily now more than ever in the data space, where, you're looking at identity, devices, applications, data, infrastructure, networks, all the bits and bobs from IoT. You mentioned IT and OT. They are not equal. IT and OT are not equal. So, toss that out to you guys for some conversation around how that maps with some of the Microsoft stuff.
I'll let you go ahead. Unique.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I was trying to give Chris some light. I felt like I was.
Yeah, I want the expert to do all the talking
time. No, I was. No, you're right, and I think once upon a time, we were probably Microsoft was probably a culprit of that. I think everyone in the industry, zero trust is being a new term and new methodology, and I think marketers all around were guilty of overusing that term, for product. But
like big data was all the word.
Like big data, and it became like a term that was like thrown out there, but like no one really ever knew like exactly what it was. But no, and I mentioned Mark Simos, who has been a terrific thought leader in this space, and yeah, you're right. Zero trust isn't a product. It isn't something that you buy. It is a methodology, is a set of principles that you enforce, and you can do that with multiple products. It's not a Microsoft thing, it's not a Google thing, it's not an Amazon thing. It's part of a methodology, of a framework, which at its principle is how do you redefine our typical approach to enterprise or business, or just really security, in terms of access and providing access and protecting the data, which is really at the root of everything around zero trust. If you think of in a big circle, the center of that circle is the data. It's the value of the data and the mechanisms that you have around that data to protect it, whether it's physical firewalls, whether it's access controls, whether it's groups, whatever, what have you, you name it. And the further that you expand outside, obviously you can have different technologies and intrusion detection, which different things that were put in traditionally to protect this data. So zero trust is obviously a principle. It's saying like, hey, that classic model of protecting data is inefficient. It's binary. It's kind of on and off. Like, before, when I was coming into the field, security was like, network security guys, working on Juniper firewalls and locked behind so it's like, hey, you put in an access control and a firewall rule, and you allow, people into your firewall, and that was it. It was like your boundary was was the enterprise, firewall. And once people were inside the enterprise, I mean, your controls pretty much were relegated to whether or not you had the right security access controls on a file. Yeah, and in time and time over the years, we found that being inefficient, and zero trust really focuses on identity. Identity as this new access plane, and it's been said before, identity is that new access control plane, because it's true, because now we even with the proliferation of what we have now, we're now a digitized environment. Everything is digital, from your users, digital identities with users, with applications, with devices, with services. And that classic binary on and off switch for security doesn't work anymore. So that's where you
Yeah.
need more intelligence to really continuously determine if a person or thing is really who it claims to be, and how do you really attest to make sure that it follows the security controls that are compliant or congruent with your policy. So
Yeah.
that's where zero trust goes a little bit deeper. We talked about TOGAF and the open group framework. We talked about NIST. All of these things go into zero trust as a really, what's the core policy decision point? What is that core mechanism that's going to determine if something requests access, if it's compliant with your policy, and how is it going to determine to let this entity, and I say thing specifically because a
You don't
thing
know
could
what
be,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
it could be a person, it could be an application, it could be a non-interactive process that is accessing a piece of material. So what is that decision point that's going to determine whether or not that stuff is allowed? And that's really at the process of zero trust, is really denying, explicitly denying access, and really only allowing access to locations, to data based on policy that's determined by you, and that can be continually assessed.
It kind of kicks in the teeth the trust but verify methodology that we used to
Right,
do.
right.
It's like, no, I don't trust you. Validate yourself first.
Yeah, yeah. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of friction, and I think that was the cumbersome part in the early years. Is like, hey, you talk about MFA, people were they were reluctant to go to multi-factor authentication because you don't want to degrade the user experience. People they don't want to be prompt every time they need to access a website. And so that's where we start to build this intelligence, and we say, hey, we need to balance out user experience with security. And I think that's the journey that zero trust, from a methodology framework, and then vendors such as Microsoft, they're going with, wait, how do we, one, identify the risk level, the quantify the risk, or the value of the data that's being accessed. And then you can start to categorize and tier it out. You can say, hey, for highly sensitive information, we're going to enforce a certain amount of authentication, or different types of authentication. If it's general information, I'm not going to, we're not going to prompt Chris 20 times and ask for his DNA, his biometric, or anything like that. So
I'm going to create a conditional access policy just for that, for him.
There are some days when I question that, because I'm just like, is somebody playing a joke on the security team? Like, what's happening right now? Why do I have to authenticate 15 times in a row? What's going on?
So I think the agility, the improvements in agility and user experience is still some ground to make up. But with things like password lists, and we talk about pass keys and things like that, they're really trying to limit the amount of friction that a user has to experience with authenticating, but then giving companies and organizations, the people that we're talking to, some confidence that, hey, my stuff is being protected at an adequate level. That's where these frameworks, that's where zero trust comes into play. Zero trust is here to stay. It's no longer a marketing term. It's definitely grown into principles that are codified. NIST has standards that are based around zero trust. ISO has standards. It's CISA has standards to really ground small, medium businesses, even an enterprise, on how to reinforce those standards of zero trust, to make companies more secure.
Yeah, for sure. That's all great points. I'm going to kind of take the next one and kind of bucket it, because I think you might have addressed some of the things and some of the solutions that Microsoft provides in the Defender line, right? So Defender isn't that little icon in the corner anymore that everybody tried to, just on your machine. It's actually crazy stuff now. So there's Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Server, Defender for Cloud, Defender for 365. There's like so many Defender products, and it's all under the hood brand of Defender. And I just, from my notes, I just put on, it's integrated threat protection. Like if you want to do Defender solutions purely, that's a great place for basically your SMB to mid-tier. Great place to start, because you can map to some of these controls just with some of those Defender solutions. And, if you're an E5 user, you got most of them already. So, you can just apply and configure, but there is alignment in the I can't verify this, but I can verify that it actually aligns with NIST and other frameworks when you deploy it in a specific way. I'm sure that was intentional, but I can't claim that. But the Defender solutions I am a big fan of. There's one Defender solution that used to be kind of coupled with it, and we're not going to talk too much about it today because we're going to have a show about it later. The next show actually about posture management. So that's near and dear to my heart because all these frameworks, we can put them on the ground, but if we're not making sure we're still doing it, we need to have those in play. And it's good to see that there's the intertwinedness of all these solutions are seamless and easy to go. Is there any other, Chris, anything you want to add about any Defender solutions or SQL or anything related to the data space that you've seen?
I mean, it's interesting. I feel like we don't make it super easy as Microsoft, with the way that products are changing, names are changing. And one thing I certainly, I fully appreciate, that was certainly and fully at the same time, certainly. I fully appreciate some of the challenges with that, just given not really understanding, okay, why did the name change? Well, oftentimes it has to do with the fact that we're adding features and we want to differentiate those features, right? And if you're a mid-market, to a small company, it's really tough to navigate all of that, and with all of the products that are out there, you see the smaller companies, they don't even have dedicated security people, and so there's a lot of, I guess, figuring out when it comes to the different products and what they do, and we say it oftentimes on the show here is, find a professional organization that you can work with and you can trust to help with these things, right? Yeah. It's so important to at least be educated, in these areas that, no matter what Defender product you're wondering about, right? Just know that it's a part of a bigger suite. The suite is designed to overlap across any need you could possibly have. And when you talk about Azure integration, 365 integration, et cetera, those are the pieces that I think folks need to realize that, instead of the legacy tools you used, that generally may not work anymore. I mean, I wonder how many people have Kaspersky still, installed on their networks and things like that, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and it's just like, I think to my earlier point, like, it's like everything else these days where if you don't stay on top of it, you're going to pay the price, right? And so, regardless of what the actual product is, understanding where it's going to help your organization, I think, is the more important thing.
Use this fire to synapse in my brain. I'm going to say it right now. One of my key takeaways from it is staying on top of it, because if you don't, there's something that will happen to you. I refer to it as a resume generating event. Because if you're not taking it, your data stewardship, your network stewardship, your server steward, your infrastructure stewardship properly, and at least making awareness, whether your organization chooses to do something or not, you're going to be wind up, in a hard spot maybe, because, somebody's going to have to get smacked down, and it's usually the guy who didn't man the helm.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, like, you're right. I mean, we don't make it easy, at Microsoft, and I empathize with our customers. And I, even as a customer myself, I was always kind of frustrated, but I think even now in recent years, you're seeing like these massive name changes that are happening frequently. And to Chris's point, it's done for a reason. I mean, the industry has changed so much in the last just 4 or 5 years in terms of like the advancements in innovation and technology, and Microsoft in a lot of ways, in a lot of domains, we're leading the way, but we have to, we have to unify and sometimes consolidate and bring everything under particular umbrellas and tranches to simplify our portfolio. So yeah, we don't make it easy. It's getting there. Hopefully we'll see less and less name changes and brand name changes. But again, I think that's the value of having a trusted security partner. Microsoft, and we'll even say like, hey, our partners are the heart to our ecosystem. So partnering up with folks like Michael and his organization that are tied in with our product groups and our field teams to really understand these rapid changes and helping companies to really synthesize that and accelerate at the drop of a dime. That's the value of having a trusted security partner that can help you implement a lot of these frameworks. So I kind of break it down simply when I speak to customers. Listen, we're talking about front office. So everything front office is what I think your information work is, your productivity suites. This is your endpoints, devices, mail, applications, everything that's really just generally just to operate your business and the users that are consuming those. And then we talk about back office. This is your infrastructure, things that's going to run in your data centers or the cloud to kind of get these applications running or business services running. And really, our Defender suite covers both ends. So a lot of our front office solutions that you hear, Defender XDR or Defender for on your desktops, really equate to stuff that we see from that front office persona, things in the enterprise, the medium bit, small medium business tranche. And then for the back office is our Defender for cloud. So this is our core cloud infrastructure protection. So if you're hosting stuff in the cloud, if you're building your new AI model, or hopefully leveraging the open AI model from Azure, that we have plenty with Azure Foundry, and you need to know how to protect that, and you need to have some reassurance that these things that you're bringing to market are secure inside of the Azure cloud. Then we have Defender for cloud, and everything that encompasses that is again geared towards protecting those IaaS PaaS workloads and that compute storage that you're building in the cloud. Yeah. So just think front office, back office. Defender is that unifying security product that brings it all together. And to your point, posture management is, which we'll talk about next segment, is your ability as a security practitioner, regardless if it's Azure or GCP or AWS. I want, as a practitioner, to be able to see what my security posture looks like across everything. Because that's what I'm accountable for. I'm not accountable just for only Microsoft. I'm accountable for everything that's in Google and AWS and Microsoft and on-prem. And I need to have some executive level reporting that I can really ground on to justify our investment and our progress year over year, month over month.
Yeah.
I'll end off by saying that one of the key things, and we talked about compliance, and part of that E5 security or E5 suite is, and since we're talking about frameworks, we do have Compliance Manager, which is a set of our compliance suite that really gives you these industry controls, NIST, HIPAA, GDPR, and it allows you to ingest those security controls that allows you to comply and assess that against your own security program. So that's a great way as a practitioner to say, hey, my company, we just got purchased, or we're purchasing, we're doing M&A, we now have some presence in the EU. How do we comply with GDPR with our current estate? And you light up one of these templates, it'll do a discovery, it'll assess your environment, give you a good fancy report as to where you stand at, and some actionable steps that you can start to comply. So leverage your investment, leverage partners, and that's a clear-cut way to see success and start really quantifying some value with your investment.
That's a sound clip right there. I'm cutting that little bit out and just That's going to be LinkedIn, man, because that's beautiful. That's a great way to look at it. So you mentioned something that just fired a synapse off in my brain too. There's all kinds of stuff firing today. You mentioned back office. Do you remember the days of NT4O with back office server?
Oh my gosh. You're bringing back the SMS 2.0 days. Yeah,
Yep.
the Citrix Metaframe. Yeah.
Totally dated myself, but you know, yeah, that's great. And the other thing I'm a staunch believer of, again, cannot confirm or deny, is that every time Microsoft either rejiggers the way a product is or comes out with a new product, there's right behind it are two teams. Team one is a co-pilot team to develop a co-pilot for that. And the other team is the security team saying, how do we overlay and integrate Defender into this product or suite? It just seems to be the case. Again, cannot confirm nor deny, but it's good to see that it's the overarching views are not lost, right? I know we're getting a little long on time, so I want to wrap into this next bit because I think we talked about it a little bit, but I want to toss it back out there is like how to choose the right framework. So, some of the notes I threw down and threw out was, industry regulations. I talked about it before, GDPR, HIPAA, things like that. Obviously, that helps you guide into a particular framework. Business size and complexity. We talked about, the Defender suite and a lot of the compliance manager, stuff like that might be a more curated way for mid-tier or lower to get there. And also, the technology stack, right? For instance, if you are 100% Microsoft shop, does it make sense to go out and buy Bob security stuff and try to integrate it with multiple points of integration? Or does it make sense to use something that is in the upper right-hand corner of the Gartner quadrant of, the Microsoft suite of security services? So they're the things that I kind of, I hedge people towards that because I like that. I feel it solves business problems. It's, tried and true. It's there and available, and it's not astronomically expensive. There's things that, from a security perspective, we were talking about before, like, we didn't really touch much on networking. A lot of people don't know Microsoft offers private access. That might help cut some security holes and lower your attack surface if you're monitoring and managing it through that one vein. So choosing the right framework is clutch, and get your friendly neighborhood consultant, get your Microsoft reps, get out in front, get informed so you can help make that decision. Is there any other areas you wanted to touch on that area, guys?
I think we talked about it earlier. I mean, you got to start somewhere, right? And so and like you said, if it's an industry specific regulation that you need to adhere to, obviously you want to go down that path, but start somewhere, right? Just start somewhere.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just to your point, Mike and Chris, I think it really starts with, as a leader practitioner, is working with partners, working with people who you trust. And I think that's super critical. There's a lot with these frameworks. It's very verbose. It can be comprehensive. Knowing your intentions, knowing your industry, knowing your business, and knowing what the outcomes need to support and comply with, I think, and working with companies and consultants and groups that can help you really formulate a strategy to get you to where you need to be. The tooling is the tooling, whether it's Microsoft or anybody else, preferably Microsoft, but it's the strategy behind it. And even at Microsoft, we have a lot of personnel, we have investments across the organization that can get you that thought leadership, on a level of a Mark Simos with our cloud solution architects to help you sit down and architect and design and strategize. But it starts out with understanding, and there are folks like Michael on this call who can help you really align to a framework and use the tooling, your investment to get to where you need to be. And working with a vendor, every vendor, Microsoft, we believe we're security partners before, we prefer to be a partner versus a vendor. But it's whatever tooling that you investing, security platform you investing, just make sure it integrates, because, we're out of this whole proprietary way of doing things, and the open standards and industry standards allows you more flexibility to not be boxed into a proprietary platform that only speaks, NetBUI 2.0 or something. But yeah,
Wow.
you want something that's gonna you want something that's going to really align and have the agility to adapt to modern standards and protocols and things that are coming out to get you where you need to go.
Yeah, you definitely hit on that. Our last bullet point for this segment is practical tips for implementation. They're right there. The only thing I would add to it is agency. So when you're sometimes security teams and organizations pick the tool. Sometimes, there's no security group there. So it's a V-level person who had a lunch and learn, or it's an IT guy who thinks or used something in the past. Before you do that, even if you want to lead with that's what you want to do, get people at the table who consume your services and look at what the impact on them would be, in making sure that they have a voice, or at least they're heard. Give them agency at the table. Bring in the networking team, bringing the data team. Definitely bring in the data team. I'm not saying that because Chris is here and he used to, he's a big data guy, but there's a lot of things on a security level that can hitch up a data chain, right? If you're moving stuff from, IoT through different, and you don't think it through, or things are getting caught. Give people a voice. And if you give people a voice in your organization, your goals will be more apt to be successful, because everyone kind of knows what's going on and they felt like they had something to do with building of that solution. And it's not a false, hey, have them sit there so they feel good about themselves. They actually do have agency and have helped shape that solution, at least the areas that impact them, or maybe give, security practitioners, or if you don't have that, an IT practitioner, everybody at the table so we can come up with a solution. That's the only other tip I have from an implementation perspective. I'm sure we could probably have a show just on implementing IT solutions. Let's kind of get some key takeaways here. I think I chirped along the way. Chris, what are your key takeaways of you want people to know about today?
Yeah, I mean, man, I learned so much. The reality is that there are a ton of resources out there, right? And I get it. Sometimes it's just too much. It's overwhelming. I can remember, back in the day when you deploy a server, a Microsoft server, and they had their own naming for different things. And it was, you'd have to like navigate and you have to read a whole dictionary to understand what a specific feature was in, an Exchange server or a SQL server or something, because it didn't match the naming of what you were used to. And the problem is that there are a lot of terms that are ambiguous, and it can be very confusing, right? And so I can promise any of the organizations out there that if you go with a reputable firm that is a Microsoft partner who is going to be vetted, right? And whether or not they're Microsoft only shop, or they do work with other options, help them or use them to help you navigate where you want to go with this, right? And so maybe they help you pick a framework and get you started, or maybe they take it over and have a complete managed service where they have the ownership. But again, it can be intimidating, but it's not worth overlooking. If even when it gets to be a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Key takeaways, or anything you would just want to highlight here, Unique, as a final?
Plus one of what Chris said, I think it can definitely be overwhelming, and I think there's a lot, and let your partners help you get to that point of identifying where you need to go. At Microsoft, we're fortunate, especially where I'm at in manufacturing, is that we are a unit or an organization full of a conglomerate of different manufacturing customers. So everyone has been at a certain point on whether it's the low end or the high end of this cybersecurity maturity model, and how these different controls are applied across industry. Look at your ISACs. If you're in a particular industry, there are other, network with other companies to understand how they comply with different industry regulations or organization regulations. But more importantly, if you have a good trusted security partner, or partner that you're working with overall, they should be able to help guide you. And I would say challenge them, challenge them. Everything that we've spoken about in terms of these industry frameworks, these aren't opaque or ambiguous or
very clear.
very clear framework. So anyone, if you have a trusted partner, they should be able to, one, have the knowledge, to know how to comply with that, and then secondly, have the expertise to, to support you during that journey to help you get to where you need to go. So it's as we like to say, security is a team sport. Especially, it's you can't do it alone. You shouldn't do it alone. You shouldn't feel like you have to do it alone. So reach out. Call us, call Chris, myself, Mike. And others,
we're all here for you.
Others in the field, and that's what we're here for. And it's each one teach one, so we can learn from one another.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to echo that point, if you are a Microsoft partner, as I am with the day job, and you're not bringing Microsoft in or letting them know what's going on, especially with the larger customers, I always reach out to find out who's there, who's in there, what specialties are in there, and I let them know my conversations, because I'm an advocate of the customer for Microsoft, and I'm an advocate of Microsoft for the customer. I'm that bridge that wants to bring everybody in the room. Like we mentioned before. So, we get experts like the two of you on today to get either of you or your counterparts in a room is a really good thing for a business, and it should mean something to that business. So, we're constantly bringing partners in, or Microsoft in, and likewise, when you have that kind of relationship, we can do so much for your business together. So that's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much again, Unique. We really appreciate your time, your expertise. I almost just want to sit here and listen to you go all day, because there's so much you got, and
I'm a boring guy. I don't think you want to do that.
Well, I can't believe the time clipped by. So we might have to split this into 2 shows. This is awesome. This is a good one.
Yeah.
But as always, everyone, thank you so much. If you're watching this, thank you. If you're listening, thank you. I know that a lot of people hear our voices on the treadmill or in the car, and so we're going to continue with the podcast releases as well as the video releases. We appreciate everything you do. Take a look at the show notes, because I'm going to put some links in down below, and hopefully during editing we can throw some up on the screen here too as well. Get a little interactive stuff going on here to kind of point you towards some information. Reach out to us, engage with us. I know a lot of people like what we see, and if you're listening, this is something that YouTube people do all the time, and I'm going to do it. 92% of you that watch these shows don't subscribe, so we need subscribers. So help us out.
Go subscribe.
Yeah, go subscribe. That being said, we really want you to give some feedback, and I'm going to put a link down in the show notes. I want you to give some feedback about your experiences with security frameworks and things that maybe you have experienced, either positive or negative, with trying to get that implemented in your organization. I'm trying something different this time to get some engagement. I'll probably stand up a Discord or a conversation thread on LinkedIn, and we'll see what you all have to say, because I want to hear what you say. Because like when we sit in front of a customer, we want them to talk, because that makes us learn and help guide. Same thing with our public at large. We want to hear from you so we can help teach you and guide you the things that we know, or at least get you to someone who can. Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, Chris, as always, my friend, and thank you, Unique. We got the next one coming. See you on the next show. Thank you all.
Thank you all.